Hi, my name is Jess from Art by Panza. Welcome back to my channel, and if this is your first time here, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you stick around. Today I'll be showing you how to paint 3 Halloween motifs using only 3 colours. So we'll be using primary colours in order to make secondary colours, and then using a little bit of colour theory to make browns and blacks. So let's jump in. So the materials that you'll need will be watercolour paper. I'm using a watercolour sketchbook for this. We have 3 watercolour paints, so I'm using primary colours from my split primary palette, and these are the cool colour variations. So I have Hansa Yellow Medium, Phthalo Blue Green shade, and Quinacridone Lilac. So basically just a primary yellow, a primary blue, and a primary red or magenta. And I already have these paints on a ceramic dinner plate that I'm using as my palette. So I have the blue, yellow, and red here. I'll be using 2 paintbrushes, so these are round watercolour paintbrushes, and I'm using a size 6 and a size 1 just for details. I have 2 jars of water here. One will be filled with clean water and one I'll use to clean my brushes. And I've also used a pencil to draw my sketches, and I've just used a kneaded eraser to lift that graphite a little bit. So the 3 Halloween motifs that I'll be painting are a jack-o'-lantern, a witch's hat, and Frankenstein's monster, and these will all be painted using only 3 colours. So using the primaries, I'll be mixing an orange, a purple, and a green. From there you can also mix brown and black. So I'll start on my witch's hat first. So I'm going to mix a purple for the fabric of the hat, and I'll use orange for this belt, and I'm also going to use some black for this spider detail once we get to mixing black. So on my palette here, I'll grab blue, and I will add lilac. I want this purple to be an even mix of both colours, so I don't want it to necessarily lean blue or lean red, and I think I'm happy with that colour here. So I've picked up that pigment and I've just added some water, and I'll start by laying down a base coat for this hat. And I like using round brushes for this because you can get a fine point. So even though I'm using a larger brush, you can really go in and get some detail. And I'll keep this first layer a little transparent. The reason being is that I'll use some darker paint to put down the creases that I had drawn in. Watercolour will lighten as it dries, and being a transparent medium, this is a really great way to make the most of your paint and really achieve that beauty that comes with watercolour paintings. So I'm going to let that dry, and next I will mix orange for the jack-o'-lantern. So I'll grab some yellow, and I just want to add a touch of lilac to this one really. I think that's good for now. So I'll add some more water to that, and we'll go in with our first coat of paint. I'll be painting the face detail in black, so I don't mind going over those areas just with orange paint. And while I wait for this to dry, this paint is still a little bit wet, so I'm not going to paint the belt just yet. I might move on to Frankenstein's monster. So I'll mix some green, and I want this green to lean yellow. So I'm adding a lot more yellow than blue, and we've got this almost lime green colour. And if you've added too much of one colour, you can always go back in with the other. So I'm happy with that. I'll add some water here. And I'll go in and paint the monster's face. I'm going to drop in a bit of extra pigment just under the hairline, just to give his face a bit of texture. So I'm just going in and dropping some pigment all over. So our first layers of paint are finished. When these are all dry, then we can move on to the next step. And I like to test if my paper is dry or if my paint is dry just by using the back of my hand. And if the paper feels quite cold, or there's any kind of cold to that paper, it means that the paint is not yet dry. So you can continue, but you may get some bleeding into the dry paint and you'll get some blooms, which is great if that's what effect you're kind of looking for. If you don't want to wait for this to dry naturally, you can use a craft heat tool just to speed that process up. So now I'm going to go in with the orange that I had already mixed for the jack-o'-lantern, and I'm going to paint the belt on this hat. If you've got too much water here, you can just dry your brush on the paper towel and move the rest of this paint around. So next I will mix some brown for the top of the jack-o'-lantern. So my preferred way of mixing brown is adding blue to orange. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of blue and start adding it to orange. And if you've gone too far in one direction, you can add more yellow and red. So the reason that orange and blue make brown is because orange and blue are complementary colours. So mixing complementary colours is a great way to mute colours, and you can just keep going back and forth until you've got the colour that you prefer. So it's still leaning a bit green for me, so I'm just adding more red, and there we go. So I'll go in and I'll paint in the stalk. And I'm just using a thirsty brush to remove some of this paint, just to lighten it up a bit. So now that this witch's hat is dry, I'm going to take my small brush and go in with a darker shade of purple. So I'm just using less water. I'm just going to add some detail lines in. You don't have to be super precise, I'm just adding them wherever there are some creases. And I'm also going to add some of this purple around this belt and adding just a little bit more water, and I'll paint in these areas where the fabric of the hat is folded up, just to create some dimension. I'm going to mix the darker orange just to separate these segments and to accentuate these kind of cutout areas before I go in with black. So I'm just going to remix some orange because I went straight into brown. So I've added a bit of water to that new mix, and I'm just going to paint these two segments. And I'll dry this off, and then I'll go over the other segments just a little bit more. Actually, now that that's dried, I think I'm going to leave it that way. So using my smaller brush, I'm going to pick up some more orange and I'll paint in these little cutout sections. So this is just to create some dimension. And now I'll wait for that to dry. And I want to just create a bit of dimension on this belt here. So I've just picked up some more orange and I'm just using some long brush strokes just to create a bit of depth here. And I'll also go in and outline this belt. I'm even going to go in with some purple again and just accentuate these folds. I'm also going to go in and add maybe some light outlines to the jack-o'-lantern here. And I'll add a little bit of detail to the stalk. So I'm now going to mix black and I'll add in the shadows for the inside of the jack-o'-lantern. I'll add the spider and I'll finish off the hair and the face details for the monster. So I've got some brown on my palette here already and I'm going to add blue to it and add colours where I need. I feel like it's leaning a bit green, so I'll go in and add red. And I think that's pretty good. So I'll start off with the hair. And I'll just drop more colour in here. But you can always go back in with a second layer if it feels like it's not dark enough. I'll go in with my detail brush now and I'll fill in these cutouts. And I realised there was a cutout that I missed, so I'll go back into that and finish that later once this is all dried. And I'll go in and I'll add this spider as well as the monster's eyes. I'm also using darker green to add a bit of an outline. And I'm adding a bit of brown to the green. For his scars. Adding some final outlines to the jack-o'-lantern, and I'm going to grab some of that black and water it down to make a grey for these bolts. And I've just dried that quickly because I want to go in with the darker grey just to outline this. I'm just going over some of these staple scars just to add a little bit of difference and dimension, and that is all done. Those are my 3 Halloween motifs using only 3 colours. And there we have it. You have just painted 3 Halloween motifs using only 3 colours. I hope that you got something out of this video. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment and I'll get back to you. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.